Above Earth, the Galactic fleet lingered. Their spacecraft are sleek, silent, and full. Utilizing centuries-old technologies, their leaders looked over the blue. The planet below is laughing scornfully. Earth, with its mountains and forests, dispersed cities, appeared to be a backward world that is very different from the high-tech realms in which they were dominant. Humanity was only a species of curiosity, experimenting with metal pieces while the galaxy strode ahead from their Earth's defenses from a distance absurd. Their scans revealed some nuclear arsenals, basic weapons, and armor with mechanization. Yet it was all not as advanced as the fleet in comparison to their plasma guns and ionized shields. Earth's arsenal appeared to be remnants of. It's like to witnessing an ancient age. Animals attempt to control fire. The commander waved a sneer scornfully at Earth's meager defenses when the sensors of the fleet searched the surface, where they detected indications of human handicraft using a system of basic tools from hand-forged blades to plows. The commanders laughed and traded amusedly. Looking at them, it was unimaginable that a society would continue to depend on human effort and simple equipment, as they created everything using machinery and humans were down with artificial intelligence. There, anvils and hammers are being used. Metal by hand, as they have done for thousands of years. What were these people thinking? Screen in the command center showed the way a man moves in a remote village, working on a forge. With his arms were strong and his motions were purposeful. With steadfast focus, he took a piece of metal till it sparkled before striking it with an iron. Bit by bit, hammering it into the Galactic officers chuckled in a primitive manner. They sneered, not understanding Mitiri. The complex technique that goes into each swing, the automated systems they were accustomed to, could create anything in a matter of seconds. Not this gradual muscular exertion, as they observed the blacksmith going on. His task, disregarding the perspiration on his forehead. Each blow of his hammer was accurate. And the commanders were unable to refute there was something captivating about his focus. However, they brushed it off as little more. He was more stubborn than humans, after all. Simply forming a piece of metal that is attached to provide a simple yet useful tool. People was unable to comprehend that this ancient ritual had any significance in a society where it was intended for weapons to be sleek, mechanized, and electronic. In spite of themselves, a few commanders observed, deeply captivated by the man's perseverance. He was obviously pouring out his strength into every muscle used for a strike, steadily stretching his hands. As he shaped the forge cast shine on the metal, his face was illuminated by an orange glow, emphasizing the resolve in his. One officer sneered as he said all of this, searching for what was a toy axe. But he discovered himself observing, motionless, enthralled by the unadulterated devotion of the, maybe he thought, blacksmith. There was a lesson here, but he discarded it right away. As the hours went by, the idea, the shape of the blacksmith's axe started to emerge. Despite its roughness, the weapon possessed in its strength is evident in every edge, was precise and crisp at every aspect. Was a device created not just with strength in mind, but equilibrium and perseverance. But the commanders, their own technology caused them to shake their heads. Could make weapons using just one, believed that there was no worth in what they were observing and categorizing it as a futile battle of a basic creature. But one scout was unable to get rid of the sensation. Thought there was more to this than this work, but he was afraid to say it aloud. Questioned whether they were lacking something. He saw how fierce the blacksmiths pay attention to how his hands appeared to know the metal, closely forming it using a degree of accuracy that no machine could match. To the scout, it was nearly as despite the fact that this jerk had used an ancient wisdom that contradicted their why. Even the Galactic commander, silent, appeared somewhat enthralled with the blacksmith was working on a project. Something special and particular, as though every blow was linked to the man himself, displaying his power and his metal narrative. But to the commander, Earth remained a remnant of a planet where people squandered time on things like inefficiencies, which he considered admirable. Simply in that people had held on to their customs. But deep inside I can't help but wonder if this bond, the blacksmith's creation, was something that their cutting-edge technology had lost a long time ago. The scene went on to forge that is illuminated at night as the blacksmithing diligently in a peaceful village. The blacksmith stood at the muscles of his forge, height from years of manual practice, stable after spending hours perfecting his craft. While he wasn't a young man, each he moved with accuracy, and the forge screamed with purpose as he stoked the heat from the fire circling him in. He set a substantial chunk of iron on the waves into the flames, intently observing as it started to glow, the metal becoming somewhat softer, sufficient to be molded. This was not a challenge. It was necessary for the weak of heart. Endurance, fortitude, and most importantly, respect while the iron heated the procedure. The blacksmith set up his tools, each in a certain order refined by years of expertise. He was aware that the hammer blow had to be intentional, and his hands were carefully chosen for each viewpoint. Understood this work as though they had their own, guided by their skills and instincts transmitted through generations. He wasn't merely generating weapon that he was bringing to life metal, turning it into something bigger and more intentional with thee. He lifted the metal that was burning a vivid orange, took it out of the forge and placed it on his as the initial blow reverberated through a deep ringing sound in the air that his bones vibrated. He repeatedly struck, forming the metal with every forceful strike perspire. It was a rhythm that was streaming down his face. Every swing is a dance between a man and metal. Was determined by measuring the force to form without breaking to form a mold. But not the iron weakened and the edges started to flatten, developing as the head of the axes began to come out tough yet full of promise. Was labor that required undivided focus. The blacksmith's gaze remained fixed on the metal. His focused focus, he was aware of the equilibrium required for an axe in the manner that it had to feel the weight in the hand that made it possible for quick, strong cuts to wasn't sufficient for it to appear correct. Had to fulfill in order to be trusted in the intensity of combat or the routine duties of every hammer blow in daily existence was evidence of his dedication to making something useful but lovely thing that may be combined with time as well as utilized following hours of he plunged the axe while shaping and pounding. Enter the water, which is hissing with steam. The metal abruptly cooled and solidified. The contrast between cold and heat provided its power that turned soft iron into it, was essential to toughen steel. The first moment that might make or ruin he carefully observed the entire piece. Adept in observing every detail as around the water, it bubbled and sizzled. He could see that the metal was hardening. The metal had been processed flawlessly, was now ready and as rough as it was sharp, to endure the demands of its. Intending to cool the metal, he sent it back to the annealing for improvement. Edges to smooth the surface and highlight. He worked with his inner strength, carefully sharpening and grinding every movement that brings the axe nearer to completion. His equipment was basic, but his understanding made them into extensions of forming the metal himself, using accuracy that no machine could. Replicating it required refinement. Of making something out of roughness, he honed the blade in a fatal inaccuracy. A delicate edge started to shine through. A testament in the forge's light to the expertise of the blacksmith. When the blade was completed, he focused his attention on the handle, choosing a robust piece of he carefully cut it out of seasoned wood. Forming it to precisely match the axe, he sanded and wiped the head, testing the balance to make sure it would sit. The handle was comfortable to hold in the hand. It has to be just as important as the blade. Robust yet pliable and capable of absorbing stress, it was an artistic endeavor without breaking. A grip that went well with the blade. It seemed like an arm extension. Something that was incorporated into its at last. The wielder united the blade and the metal handle that holds them in place, wedge that secured their position. The completed axe was weighty in his hands, but balanced a weapon of unwavering determination strength. He looked it over carefully while running his fingers along the edge of the blade, sensing the balance and weight of it. It was more than simply a tool. It was a fragment of himself that reflects his talent, perseverance, and fortitude. It was a weapon that was created to last, not only using iron and fire, but also using a true craftsman's heart and soul. As he took a step back to examine his work, had a subtle sense of pride in this axe. It was more than simply wood and metal. It was a tale. Legacy of innumerable hours being proficient in his field served as a reminder of a universe in which hand tools were used, where each component contained a portion of the who made it at the precise moment. The blacksmith was aware that his labor was more than just a deal. Tradition is evidence of the inventiveness of people. And tenacity without fanfare, he established that despite knowing it was ready, the axe was down. Ostentatious or sophisticated, yet it was strong. In its ease of understanding and the attention to detail that has gone into its creation was a continuation of a world that placed importance on perseverance and competence in a world that stood company, despite others switching to automation. This axe would withstand a lot of automation, an emblem of tenacity and evidence of the tradition's strength and hardness. Competence of the commanders of the Galactic fleet observed the blacksmith's craft, using a blend of surprise and laughter for creatures used to making everything with just a machine command. This, they thought, sluggish manual labor was ridiculous. Every hammer stroke is meticulous. Change, and was unable to comprehend why would somebody spend so much time and energy into a personal weapon. Technology enabled them to create firearms immediately with accuracy down to the atom, but a man was spending hours forging a single metal piece for them. It even felt archaic and ineffective. Some officers are useless among the ranks. Openly ridiculed the procedure. They wondered why someone would depend on antiquated techniques at a time of sophisticated. They had weapons that could vaporize whole planets, that can be controlled with a single button press, fields of energy that may penetrate almost anything and construct gadgets able to cause unspeakable devastation, but using his hammer. This blacksmith in Endel had faith in his approach, and the archaic technique of manually sculpting metal to the fleet served as a representation of Earth's backwardness, is the inability to change that. They thought it was both funny and pitiful. But in spite of their contemptuous attitudes, that Missy's black co-workers had began to attract their attention in a manner they hadn't expected there to be. There was something alluring about his focus, his steadfast dedication, even as they couldn't take their eyes off him. One of them started to sense a glimmer of curiosity, wondering whether there was. They didn't have something that they needed. Naturally, express your admiration for it. For something so archaic would be extremely still as they observed a change in perspective started to occur. As the metal was formed by the blacksmith into the captain of the fleet examined an axe, eyed each action, the manner in which he managed the iron, the accuracy with which he hit, with his obvious comprehension of his evidence, proved that he was developing a weapon that, when operated by their criteria, seems to have a unique strength. They observed his ability to manner in which he employed both strength and delicate combination of physical force and an instinctive perception of the metal, in spite of themselves. Commanders had to acknowledge that this procedure was much more involved than they had first believed. Several policemen started debating the efficacy of his strategy. Some said that no level of expertise could create an axe that is comparable to their advance. This axe meant nothing to them in terms of weapons. Something more than a glorified relic that would never be able to resist their energy fields or shields. But others, albeit few in number, started to question whether maybe there was something worthwhile about the blacksmith's commitment. Was evident to them. This weapon wasn't merely an instrument, it was a representation of fortitude made with a comprehension that transcended technological expertise. It seemed as though this axe contained some of the bit of the blacksmith's, the fleet's might. His spirit conversations became more heated as they observed the axis's latter phases creation. They were unable to ignore the force. Things appeared to emanate from it in the manner. It had an unadulterated, raw power that wasn't a weapon that was calculated or the blueprints. It was made with intuition by means of a connection between metal and man that their devices were capable of, unable to reproduce. While they weren't, because it would conflict with their own, they had to admit that this axe was unique, something that they had never seen before. When the blacksmith's labor was completed, the commanders observed intently, evaluating every aspect of the finished weapon. They observed its flawless sharp edge, equilibrium between the head and the handle. It appeared to nearly come to life in his, this was not a mindless item, hands. Was a gadget designed specifically with a degree of attention to detail and knowledge that was unfamiliar to them. They were experts in effectiveness of cold, calculated precision. However, this axe stood for something completely distinct, almost primordial strength that was not derived from technology, but from human stamina, and some of the fleet's captains are skilled felt a sense of respect rising. Although they promptly covered it beneath their customary conceit that they were unwilling to acknowledge that there could be value in the methods. After all, they had the upper hand of advanced technology. But this, in his basic forge, the blacksmith has produced an object that appeared to defy a weapon that was in line with their expectations. It was too strong for its own good. For their energy shields or plasma cannons, however, it had a force and weight that were unquestionably, as they turned away, couldn't get rid of the thought that maybe they had failed to see something important. The axe was more common in Earth's traditions. It was more than just a tool. It was evidence of a world that declined to reject its heritage despite the fact that it appears to be superior technology. Symbolized a strength that did not come from machines, but from the commitment of the readiness to invest one's whole, putting effort into the work. This insight, albeit unsaid, persisted in the thoughts of the commanders, contesting their convictions, causing them to wonder what real power truly meant, but they ended up laughing about it, disregarding the actions as a matter of curiosity remnant of a past time. But in their hearts they were aware that they had seen something deep, insight into a universe that favored artistry over practicality. Resilience in the face of automation. the blacksmith raised the completed axe, its weight firmly in his handles, each component with care. He ran his fingertips over the edge that had been honed. Sensing its strength and balance, each testament to hours of concentrated, he was aware that this weapon was unique. Not a straightforward instrument, but something that maintained his perseverance and determination. His personal knowledge of fire and metal, he tested it without hesitation. Cutting through a thick timber with sharpness, the blade moved with a single, crisp blow. Quickly, seemingly without effort, leaving it was strong and had a deep, silky cut. A weapon that is both effective and responsive for accuracy, as well as power. The observers from the galaxy were recalled by they had rejected the axe's performance. It is something archaic that was unable to perhaps take on their advanced weaponry, but witnessing its use made in a single stroke, they pause. The blacksmith's axe showed strength. That it wasn't what they had expected, only the blade's sharpness or the swing's driving force was the way it appeared. That the weapon was an extension of every motion made by the blacksmith himself, was fluid and organic, as though the axe were alive. Independently, the blacksmith relocated to use the axe to chop through heavier materials via metal and stone. Using assurance that resulted from years of experience, he intentionally struck each swing, demonstrating the endurance of the blade. The Galactic fleet saw expanding, anxious as the power of the axes increased unquestionably. They had anticipated it to break under stress or fail to withstand stronger materials, but it remained stable. Effortlessly slicing through, the commanders looked at each other uneasily, realizing despite its simplicity, this weapon was precisely crafted, which made "It's tough," one officer said. Idea that other people had, but unspoken, maybe there was more to powerful weapon compared to what they had originally believed. That they had utilized technology to resolve every issue, but there was a tool available. It accomplished amazing feats without sophisticated engineering. It was constructed using ability, tolerance, and comprehension, qualities that they hadn't deemed worthwhile. Upon noticing that the blacksmith's work involved more than just making an axe, it was about making something that could withstand anything, that could withstand the time and location test. The blacksmith drove the axe in the last swing into a thick sheet of iron, dividing it. The Galactic fleet observed in a clean manner. Silent, no longer ridiculing, they could see that this was dismissive weapon, but without their technological improvements, were potent in and of themselves. Yes, it was a force that originated with humans. Resilience derived from the determination to mold and construct with their own hands. They lacked comparable to no gadget that was thus closely associated with its creator in their respective worlds of mass production. The weapon was the same, but without individuality. But this particular axe was special. The Galactic commander cannot be replaced. Observed with a renewed sense of reverence, realizing that this axe wasn't simply, it served as a weapon and a symbol, a method of thinking and producing that he realized they had left long ago. That their dominance in technology had separated them from this kind of relationship. They could produce anything immediately, but they were unable to produce something with this degree of individuality, funding in the manner that the blacksmith had demonstrated to them a strength that they had failed to recognize, a strength that did not from machinery, but from commitment and skill. He was unable to ignore the respect he sensed when he looked at the blacksmiths. This axe was not a man who took pride in his work. Product that is convenient or efficient was the result of mastery and perseverance. Every hit and every change had been made with purpose, and the outcome was a weapon capable of withstanding far more compared to what they had anticipated. The galaxy, despite their improvements, the fleet could not duplicate this procedure. They could not give their works of art the same spirit, the same meticulousness that this axe was filled with. The blacksmith's pour. The energy was detected by the fleet scanners, describing the axe as steady and unimpressive by their expectations, but its performance said otherwise. It was a mystery, conundrum that their technology was unable to elucidate. How they started to understand that their dependence on machines may have restricted their perception of strength. They believed that Earth was a feeble planet that hadn't progressed. But this action demonstrated, showing them that advancement wasn't always about, at times, innovation was about improving the straightforward process of locating strength in centuries-old techniques, while the blacksmith studied his creation. The Galactic fleet discovered, faced with their own shortcomings in their quest for effectiveness, they had lost a link, something essential. The axe was a tool used by creation itself. Remembrance of a society that valued a world of craftsmanship over automation, that had not overlooked the importance of skill. The lesson was quiet and didn't need words or clarifications, only the weight of a moving hand forging blade. The axe caught the blacksmith's attention. His contentment with this weapon is apparent. would persist. It was constructed to withstand the Galactic commander experienced jealousy. Being aware that their own armaments, this sense of permanency was absent from the mighty. Their firearms were thrown away. This axe was unique, but it was replaceable. Created with an intention that went beyond it, served as a legacy and a symbol of fortitude and inventiveness that could not be reproduced in a lab. When the blacksmith put the axe down, the fleet realized what they had seen, something remarkable. This wasn't only a weapon, it was the feeling that made it. The axe represented a power. It was not able to be computed. That resulted from simplicity rather than complexity. They discovered simplicity through determination. That planet Earth, with all of its alleged the wisdom of primitive approaches, was still unable to comprehend the Galactic commander's silent acknowledgement and nod that this in his tiny forge, the blacksmith had demonstrated. The blacksmith gave them something significant. Put the completed axe down using a feeling of subdued pride, and each line curve was precise. It wasn't just a tool, but a continuation of his own expertise and commitment to a work of skill that bore the burden of centuries of. As he examined it, he noticed analysis of every moment spent in the heart of knowledge is forged by the unwavering endurance and the tenacity in completing a task. To him, from unrefined iron to polished steel, the axe belonged to a legacy that anything that can be replaced or thrown away for. The stealthy observation of the cosmic fleet astonishment. This insight assumed a distinct meaning. They arrived at recognize that the axe symbolized more than simply power or weaponry. It was evidence of a lifestyle that valued relationship to one's commitment to purpose, and the fortitude to stick with it was an instruction that went beyond their technology, so that no machine could ever duplicate the interpersonal relationship that had created this weapon. Which the commanders were aware of that in their highly developed society, where efficiency was paramount. Vital had vanished as the fleet ready to leave. They carried with them a renewed reverence for the planet, and the axe wasn't anything for its people. They may employ in combat rather than a weapon that would be appropriate for their ranks, but its creation had revealed to them something they had neglected for so long, that they identified a subtle power in those who lack a power that comes from sophisticated technologies, but in the long-term strength of skill and tradition. It was a power that was unmatched in their domain of mass production and machinery. One of the fleet's commanders, considering the axe was viewed by the blacksmith as a sign of human tenacity, that he recognized now that the might of Earth was not characterized by the level of sophistication of its weaponry, but through the will and the ability of its citizens to adapt faced hardship using instruments molded by hand with abilities developed throughout time, and a commitment that no machine could duplicate. In their pursuit of progress, they had failed to see the obvious. Understanding advancement isn't necessarily about making progress. Sometimes moving ahead requires holding on to what remains after the fleet has left, possessing an implicit comprehension of. They left the blacksmith with the worth of Earth, oblivious to his audience, but his creations have had a deeper effect on them than they could. The commanders have envisioned this encounter would last for a long time. Reminder that even the greatest advanced machines are heartless. The spirit that was incorporated into a handmade weapon, it was discovered that even though their dominance, they could never really possess the resilient attitude that Earth was confined to the remote silence of space. The commanders shared a message from the forge. Feeling that someone would follow them throughout the stars, they were aware of something special. It was not reproducible by technology or subjugated through force.